There is a unique similarity that I just learned between my blue jeans and my van. Both of them have something that is the same, and I'm going to let you try and guess what that is. Okay, so I have a picture up here. It'll be up in just a second of a pair of blue jeans. Okay, this is going to give you a little bit of hint. It's a three-letter word. It's a three-letter word that I didn't necessarily know what it meant. Okay, so that's the first hint. Okay, that fifth pocket on a pair of jeans. All right, let's go to the next picture here. Okay, that's another hint. Something that's similar between my van and my blue jeans. Okay, both of them have this three-letter word. Okay, let's go to the next picture. Okay, that is another version of that three-letter word. Okay, and now you can guess it with the fourth picture. What is it? A fob. Okay, I thought fob was probably an acronym like, fantastically overpriced buttons or something like that. Okay, but actually it's an ancient word. I mean, it's been around for hundreds of years. It actually was a reference to that waist pocket. You saw that waistcoat there, that vest, that waist pocket in which you would keep something valuable. It ended up, oftentimes people would keep their pocket watch in it. Okay, well, eventually the pocket, the word fob came to be a reference not only to the pocket, but the valuable that was kept in the pocket, or the chain that was attached to that valuable. All those things could be referenced as a fob. Well, now we have these keys, okay, that we could keep in that little fifth pocket of our jeans, okay, the little fob type pocket, okay? And I found out this last year that these things are incredibly valuable. Now, we got ourselves a new van, and so it came with two of these quote-unquote keys. Now, for those of us who've been around long enough, you realize if you lost a key 20 years ago, what would you do? You would go to the hardware store, you'd take another version of that key, and they would make you a copy. It cost you a couple bucks, and then you go home. You lose one of these, you do not have that option. We went, I thought we lost it at the soccer field. I wasn't exactly sure where we lost it. It was the last place I remembered it because we had one key with us between me and Amanda, and so I gave her the key. Well, she thought that I had the key. I thought she had the key, and we got, and it was like, okay, where's the key? All right, for our van. And so we went home, and, we looked around the soccer field. We looked around inside the van. When we got home, I checked around the house. You're tearing everything apart, trying to figure out where on earth is it. You check the pockets of your coats and your pants. And where is this? I'm like, finally, I could not find it. Now, we still had an extra one because we had two. But I'm like, well, I don't want to get in a situation where we don't have any of these keys because then we can't drive our vehicle, right? And so I'm like, well, okay, I call around. Well, you couldn't get one at Batteries Plus, okay? You couldn't get one in this, that, and the other. So I had to call the dealership. Of course, anything that you get from the dealership is going to be more expensive. And so I checked, and, they had to place it on back order, so I had to wait. So I had to make an appointment once the thing came in weeks and weeks later, because this was right during all the parts shortages, and the chip shortages. And so I found out this thing itself costs, I think it was about $135 for this. But wait, there's more. Because you have to get it programmed by a professional. So you have to take it into the dealership to get them to program the thing, which is like another $100. And I think there was some other little fee or extra cost. So it was like $250 that I was going to have to pay for this thing. It was like, seriously. So I had an appointment scheduled, I think it was for Friday. Now, you're going to think I'm turning a hard left here, okay? At home, we have a recliner in the corner, and in this recliner is on a little rubber mat because of the fact when you rock in this recliner, it wants to migrate, okay? So we put the recliner on this rubber mat to make sure it doesn't move. Well, the thing's still got a little whopper jaw, so Amanda's like, can you fix it and put it where it's supposed to be? So I picked the thing up and moved it, and I thought, oh my goodness, there is so much stuff. Because you know how it is around recliners. There's a sock, there's an extra remote, there's a key to whatever. You don't know what all this stuff is around there. Okay, so I'm like, I'll clean this up a little bit. And lo and behold, what did I find inside the recliner when I moved it? Our key. Okay, and I had this appointment scheduled to spend $250 or whatever on Friday, and this was like a Wednesday, and I found it. I was so overjoyed because I didn't find a piece of plastic. I didn't just find my key. I found $250. Okay, so I was really, really excited to find this key. And so I told Amanda about it, told the kids about it. I called my folks, told them about it. I was telling everybody about it. It's like, rejoice with me, I found my lost key, and I just saved myself a boatload of money. When you lose something that is valuable and you find that valuable thing, it's time to throw a party, right? I felt like I could take the whole family out to eat because I just saved $250, right? Keep that in mind. When something's valuable and it's lost and you find it, it's reason for rejoicing. Open to Luke chapter 15, because that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. Now, as you go there, we're in this series about Jesus having friends in low places. You know, he's a friend of tax collectors. As a matter of fact, our key verse here is Luke 7:34, and it says that Jesus was accused of being a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Okay, you know, prostitutes and tax collectors and other people who were known to be sinful. He reached out, he touched, he engaged with the people that nobody else wanted to. Okay, so we looked at him befriending tax collectors, a sinful woman, a foreign woman, a person with leprosy, you know, somebody who was caught in adultery, and she was being brought kind of before for a trial or more for a lynching almost. Okay, Jesus loved and reached out to each of these people. All of those are true stories of Jesus' interaction with individuals. Today, we're going to read 3 not true stories. Now, some of you are like, hold on a second. He's talking about the Bible. What are you saying? Okay, bear with me. You'll get it, okay, as we get into it. This is a true account of 3 not true stories, okay? So, in Luke chapter 15, let's start by reading verses 1 through 3, all right? Now, all the tax collectors and the sinners were coming near to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began to grumble, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable, saying, we're going to stop there, all right? So here's the true part. Jesus is in this interaction, and the religious leaders are all like, I can't believe he's interacting with these people. So what Jesus does, as a response to their grumbling, let me tell you a story. Okay, so a parable. What is a parable? A parable, think of the word parallel, okay, for a parable. Because what it is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. It doesn't mean that it's not true to life, but it's not necessarily an actual story that happened. So we're going to read some things that are true to life, but they have a deeper significance to them. But Jesus is not saying, hey, I saw this one time and I'm relating it to you. He's saying, here's a true to life story. So any good fiction, okay, the best definition for good fiction is the lie that tells the truth. It's a made-up story that relates something that we can all identify with because it's true to our lives. That's what these parables are, okay? So we're going to have 3 of them. There's space in your sermon notes if you want to write down any insights or anything from this, okay? So first, we're going to look at the lost sheep. The lost sheep. This is verses 4 to 7. What man among you, if he has 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. Okay? Now, this is a common experience. They lived in an agrarian society. They know what shepherds are. They've seen shepherds out with sheep. Okay? And it doesn't mean necessarily that he left the sheep unattended. There might have been other shepherds there to watch, but he's going to go after that one which is lost. Now, parables often, but not always, are interpreted for us. Now, we have to be careful with a parable to make sure that we're sticking with the interpretation that is intended by the author who's saying it. We don't just kind of come up with our own meaning or assign meaning to every little nitty-gritty piece of it, okay? Parables usually have one main point they're communicating, and Jesus leaves no doubt as to what this parable is about. Because he says in verse 7, okay, in the same way, there's going to be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who don't need to repent. They rejoice over the one, not over the 99. Now, are 99 righteous people not worth getting excited about? Well, sure they are. But why is Jesus telling this parable? What was the context? The grumbling religious leaders, the so righteous people that didn't need to repent. So were they really righteous? No. They just thought they were righteous and needed no repentance. There's rejoicing in heaven over those who realize their sin and turn and are returned to God. Okay? That's the point he's making here. Now, the next parable makes the same point, just with a different story. Start in verse 8. This is the lost coin. Or what woman, if she has 10 silver coins and loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and search carefully until she finds it? When she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin which I had lost." In the same way, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Okay, this is the one I identify with a little bit more, because I lost something in my house, and looked and looked and looked. Finally, months later, actually, I found it. There's rejoicing. But he didn't say there's just rejoicing here. I mean, up in heaven, there's rejoicing here on earth. If God's rejoicing over it, certainly we need to rejoice over it as well. But what were the Pharisees and the scribes doing? They weren't rejoicing over these people that were returning. They were grumbling about it. Okay? Now, the next parable that we're going to see is actually the one that really brings this home. Because this just talks about the lost and the found and the rejoicing. The next one is going to include the Pharisees and the scribes in the parable. And this is the parable of the lost sons. The lost sons. Okay, let's read verses 11 through 16. And he said, "A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me.' So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him." Now, you've heard this called the parable of the prodigal son before. I didn't call it that. You'll find out why a little bit later, okay? But prodigal just means wasteful. I didn't realize that. I thought it meant like wandering or something like that, but I looked it up this week. Prodigal means wasteful, and he certainly was a wasteful son. But a part of that wastefulness, was a great disregard for his dad. Now, if you think about it, if he came to his dad and said, "Give me the share of the estate that falls to me," in that culture, okay, the oldest son gets 2/3, and the younger son will get 1/3. Actually, the oldest son just gets a double portion of what everybody else has, okay? That's just the way the inheritance worked, okay? So the older son would have gotten the 2/3. Younger sons, give me my 1/3 now. In effect saying, "Dad, I can't wait for you to die. Can you give it to me now?" It's complete disregard for his dad, any kind of relationship. It was very disrespectful. It's kind of basically unheard of way to behave back then. But that's what this guy did. And then, of course, he hits rock bottom. He hits rock bottom. And when I say rock bottom, it's not just that he lost all his money. Okay? He's in a foreign land. He has squandered all of his resources to the point that he has to take a job, but not just any job. You guys remember Mike Rowe, the guy that did the Dirty Jobs show? Okay, he's talking about, okay, here's like sewer inspectors and people who have to, get skunks out from under buildings and those kind of things. I mean, nasty, nasty jobs. This would have been about the worst job for a Jewish guy to have, because he is working for an unbeliever, a pagan guy, feeding an unclean animal out in the fields. He has hit complete rock bottom. But sometimes we have to hit rock bottom before we realize how good we had it, and we decide to come home. We decide, we have a change of mind, which is really what the word repentance means. So let's see now his repentance. Verse 17. "But when he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I'm dying with hunger here? I'll get up and go to my father, and I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men.'" Hitting rock bottom gave him a new perspective on his father. Whereas before he had seen his father as money bags. Okay, this is my path to material wealth. Now he sees his father as a person who's generous and takes care of those people that are under his supervision. We hit rock bottom, we get a new perspective on our father. And he has this new perspective. So he says, "I'm going to go home and I'm going to seek a place on the family farm, but I'm not going to seek a place in the family. I know I've forfeited my right as a son. I don't belong in the family, but at least I can get a job. At least I'll have a place to stay and food to eat." Okay, so he still is seeing his father as a person who, okay, he has basic generosity. I'm not even going to ask to get back in the family. Just basic level kindness here. Okay? So let's see how that plan works out for him. starting in verse 20. So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. The kid didn't even get to finish his speech. The dad ignored his speech. The couple lines he got out, he completely ignored it. Okay? There are so many things that are wrong in this story. Okay? From the perspective of the hearers in that culture, okay, for one, for this young man to ask for that inheritance ahead of time, that was wrong. Okay? He went off and he squandered his wealth. That was wrong. And then the dad ran to him. Old men were dignified. You did not run in public like that. Okay? Back then, they wore robes. What's he going to have to do? Hitch up his robe and he's taking off after his son. He doesn't care what anybody else thinks. Okay? His love for his son overcame any sense of dignity. Also, the fact his son had walked away, but what was the dad doing? He saw his son in the distance. Was he looking for his son? Was he looking down the road, looking towards the horizon, waiting for the silhouette of that guy to come up over the hill? Okay, and also the dad, when he comes to him, does he rebuke him at all? Does he point out what he did wrong? Does he rub his face and does he even remind him? He didn't do any of that stuff. He's just glad to have him back. There is love, and there's more than just heartfelt love. There is restoration into the family. Because he says, 3 things that he says to give to this guy. Well, 4, I guess you could say. Okay, first, put the best robe on him. Who in the family is going to have the best robe? Probably the dad. Okay? Put the best robe, the most honored position. Everybody's going to realize this person is being honored. Okay? Put sandals on his feet. What does that mean? In that culture, slaves walked around barefoot. Sandals would have been reserved for those who are part of the family. So he's being welcomed back in as a son, not just as a hired worker. Third, put a ring on his finger. Chances are this was a signet ring, okay? So just like now when you go to get something notarized, they press a seal into that piece of paper or they stamp it with something, okay? It's like this is official. Back then, what would they do? They get a piece of wax or a piece of clay, and you'd stick that ring in there that's got the symbol for the family, you know, like some sort of, like a letter or a sign or something. You stick it into that, and that shows this has been authorized. It's like an authorizing seal. And he says, put a ring on his finger. He's being authorized to make transactions, legal agreements, purchases in the name of his father. He is being restored into the family. And then it says, throw him a party. Bring the fattened calf, all right? And a fattened calf is probably not just for his household. This is probably like the whole village, the whole town coming together. We're going to have a big old party to celebrate the fact that my son has come home. Now, if the father's celebrating, well, okay, you saw this here in verse 24, okay? It says, and they began to celebrate. It wasn't just dad celebrating. Everybody celebrates. When the father celebrates, we all need to celebrate too. Everybody get in on the party. Okay, you need to be as happy about this as what I am. Now, what would a failure to celebrate do? Well, if you fail to celebrate, when he's saying to celebrate, it shows that you don't have the same heart. You don't have the same priorities. You don't feel the same way about it. It's going to show a lack of relationship between you and the one who's celebrating if you say, no, I'm not going to party about this. I'm not going to be excited. Okay? Now we get to the part about the scribes and the Pharisees. All right? Although he doesn't call them out by name, they would have known. Okay, verse 25. Finish out this chapter. Now his older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing, and he summoned one of the servants and began to inquire what these things could be. And he said to him, your brother's come home, and your father's killed the fattened calf because he's received him back safe and sound. But he became angry and would not go in. And his father came out and began pleading with him. But he answered and said to him, look, for so many years I've been serving you, and I've never neglected a command of yours, and yet you've never given me a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your wealth with prostitutes? You killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you have always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live. He was lost and has been found." Now, would he have reason to be angry? Well, yeah, okay, because of the fact that there's a difference of treatment, right? And the father had been wronged. So, Dad, you're just absorbing this cost. And if he actually kind of re-inherited him, then that means that some of the older brother's inheritance would actually go to him as well, although we're not told if that was actually happening here. So he might have some legitimate reasons for anger if he looked only at the situation. But what he needed to do is he needed to look at his father. How does my father see this? The younger son had a serious selfishness problem, right? And he also had a lack of relationship with his father. Give me the inheritance now, I'm not going to wait for you to die. So he had those problems, but the older son had the same problems. They were just masked a little bit. They were a little bit below the surface. Because what does he do? Okay, he's incredibly disrespectful to his father. He doesn't address him as father the way the younger son did. And he's like, "This son of yours, you never did this for me." So he's very selfish. He's disrespectful, so he has a lack of relationship with him too. Okay, whereas the younger son was humble, the older son, he's proud. "I've served. I deserve this." He kind of had an entitlement mentality where the younger son realized he didn't deserve anything. He came begging. He came humbly. Okay, we talked about the respect and the disrespect. In the younger son, what does he do? He closes the gap between him and his father. He approaches. He comes. What does the older son do? "No, I don't want to. I'm distant." And what did it say in verse 29? "I've served you and never disobeyed your command." That word serve can also be translated slave. I have slaved for you. Both sons were distant from the father in their hearts. Only one of them went away. The other one stayed physically present, but relationally distant. He was far from the father, and he had a slave mentality. "I have done, therefore I deserve." It was a transaction. It wasn't a relationship. And this is something that I don't know if you've dealt with this before. I have, where I have looked at my relationship with God. I shouldn't say relationship. I've looked at God from a transactional standpoint. I've done this, therefore I deserve this. I've failed to do this, therefore I don't deserve, and I'm not even going to ask. But what did the father say? "All that I have is yours. This has always been here. You could have had if you had just asked. It's all available." And some of us are living like we are just waiting for our inheritance after we die and not realizing that we can have our inheritance right now while we live. Some of us have come to God because I don't want to burn in hell for all of eternity. Save me so that I've got something good on the other side. But we don't realize we're sons and daughters now. All that he has is ours. There are some things that we have to wait to experience until later. We'll get new bodies and we'll dwell in heaven. We can see God face to face. But we are sons and daughters now. But some of us are living like we are slaves now. We're living like we're only servants and not sons and daughters. All that God has is available for us. The healing, the provision, the peace, all these things. He'll give those to us now. We don't have to wait for them until later. Ask. Trust the loving heart of your Father. And if he thinks what you're asking for is not really what you should have right now, he'll tell you. He'll say no. No is sometimes a loving thing. But the thing is, don't be like the older brother who stayed aloof. Be like the younger brother who comes and says, I know that I can receive. I know that my Father is good. The older brother refused to honor the father's heart desire. What was the father's heart desire? He says, you should celebrate. The younger son, or the older son, is like, I've obeyed your commands. Son, I need you to tend the sheep. Yes, sir. Okay? I need you to go pull the weeds. Yes, sir. Stay up late. Get up early. Run this errand. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay? Rejoice with me. No way. I've said yes to you all the time. I'm not going to say yes here. Because the other ones I could do with just my outward acts of obedience. This one you're asking from my heart. You don't have my heart. You only have my actions. Does God have your heart? Are you only obeying on the outside, or does he have your heart on the inside? So these three parables follow this pattern, okay? Something's lost, something is searched for, something's found, and then rejoice. Lost, search, find, rejoice. Lost, search, find. Will you rejoice? Will you rejoice along with him? So where are you in this parable? Because he's telling these parables to try and communicate meaning to these folks, okay? So as you hear this parable, where do you see yourself? You might identify more with one brother than the other. So if you identify with the younger brother, maybe you are the straying, partying person. You know, I'm far away. I'm having a good time. You know, thank you very much, but I'm not interested. Okay? Or you could be the younger brother at the point in the story where he falls flat on his face. And I am seeing my need. I have really screwed up. But see, at that point, he hadn't made the decision yet. He'd fallen flat. He's feeding the pigs. He's longing to eat the pig's food because he's so hungry. Okay? Are you at that point where you're feeling the need, but you haven't yet decided, you know what? I should go back. I should go back to God. He's good. My Father is a good man. Okay? Are you the younger son at the point where you are returning and begging? God, I know I don't deserve it. Or are you the younger son who's actually been received? God received me. God forgave me. God has cleaned me up. He has made me a new man. Okay? If you identify with the younger son, where are you at in that process? You want to get to the end where you are fully receiving all that he has for you. But it's possible that you could be the older brother, which is where I have been in the past. And I still struggle with some older brother tendencies now, where I'm just obeying on the outside. I'm slaving as a servant, but not receiving as a son. You know, I can serve as a son, or I can serve as a slave. What's your mentality? Your outward actions might look the same. What's your inward heart? What's your motivation? Why are you doing what you're doing? Okay? And it could even exhibit itself in judgmentalism of others. It's like, well, that person really doesn't have things together very well. You know, this person's a mess. It's like, well, how dare they come back and they've fallen on their face again? You know, and you look at other people who aren't just maybe as far along as you are on your outward signs of obedience. But I can have a heart that's far from God, just like the scribes and the Pharisees. Either way, whether you are the younger brother or the older brother, the cure is the same. The cure is the same, and it's to get to know your Father. Get to know him, because both guys were missing it. Okay, both guys were missing it because they were seeing him as, you know, maybe wealthy in a way of receiving something. I'll go back to my father and just be a hired man. Even the younger son, even when he came back, he didn't realize how much his father loved him. He had a lower view of God's love than what it was true. Okay, get to know your Father. He ran to one, the father ran to one, and he also went to the other and pleaded with him. In both cases, he took initiative. I want to bridge the gap. I want to come. He pleaded with the one who hadn't even turned back to him. And he responded to the one who did turn. God is reaching out to all of us, no matter what spot that we were in. So, some things that, I'm going to close with this. You know, our worship team can get ready to come on up. Okay? Know his love, his desire to be in relationship with you. He's the God who runs to you. Okay? Know his heart for the straying, but also know his bounty and his willingness to share that bounty with you. Like the older son. The older son did not realize what all he had. Know how much God is generous and he wants you to experience what he has for you now, not just when you get to heaven. So, what is the one response that we can have to get to know him? It's to come. It's to come. The younger son got up and came to him. The older son, the father came to him, but he still needed to come on in. He still needed to respond. God is asking you to respond to him. If you want to get to know him, all you have to do is come. He will open himself up to you and reveal himself to you. So if you feel God tugging on your heart, whether you're the younger brother or the older brother, make this the time that you come. Now, he's right here with us. You can come sitting where you are, standing where you are, kneeling where you are. But sometimes it does help to put some feet to our faith and actually come forward. You are welcome to do that as well. You can kneel here on the front steps if you just kind of want to pray with the Lord, or kneel down front someplace. If you want someone to pray with you, I'll be right here in the front pew. But if he's begging with you, calling to you, running to you, make sure that you come to him as well.